operation.
This intro is much better than it has any right to be. I love it. So, welcome to the 42nd episode of the Undermind, and this time I have my guests are Hao Pan. Hi, welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having me here again.
And Dan Gant, finally, Dan has been an avid supporter of the cast and finally making his appearance. Hi Dan, how are you?
Hi, Shako. Doing well. I think this will be a lot of fun.
Actually, I think you're the first guest who said my name correctly. So congratulations. Everyone is saying with it with an S, and I just stopped bothering. So you're off to a good start, my dear sir.
Thanks. I think this will continue very well.
Okay, so the first thing is just ask how come that. Okay, let me rephrase that. So, what's up with you then? And I'm really glad that you can finally appear on the podcast. Can you tell me what's going on with you and what projects are you working on currently?
Sure. So I think most people know that I've been working with the Cherry Pie team for some time, and more recently I've left Facebook. I'm going to be taking some time off to just kind of tinker around and work on my own projects. Something I wind up doing every few years is taking a little time off and doing things of no consequence to anyone but myself. Have a little fun. And hey, last time I did that, I started working on a StarCraft bot. So we'll see what happens this time.
Sounds really great. Any project in particular, or just chill for a few days or weeks and then decide?
I've got some things. I got some things in mind, but usually I'm not going to talk about something until I've actually got some code in the writing.
Yeah, that's reasonable. And the same question to you: how what you've been up to? How are you doing recently?
In general, I'm doing well, and I've been mainly involved with some forward modeling stuff, which is really about predicting, what the opponent is up to and what kind of units he has or he will have. Of course, under the fog of war, when you only observe a few of his units, but not all of it. And secondly, it's obviously for my bot. It's mainly the bug fixes, and I was actually surprised because recently the bot managed to jump up to the number 4 on Basil, which kind of surprised me a little bit because my bot is quite weak against the big guns. But I suppose the consistency can carry me a long way. But I never expect the consistency can carry me this far. But, yeah, I mean, I've been doing the bug fixes, and I recently encountered a crash which only happened one game out of 30 games, and that's kind of annoying to deal with. But I guess I had to deal with it anyway because losing to a let's say a 50-ish ranked bot is not fun. You lose a lot of points, and at this position, number 4, number 5, winning a game is actually giving me only, I don't know, maybe 0.5 points or something like that. So yeah, it's kind of big still. So that's what I've been up to lately.
That's really great work, and I think your bot is gets the steady climber award because it like since I've been watching your ratings, you're consistently improving, and that's commendable, I think. And many other bots just jump in a low and then fall and such. So you're somewhat unique in that regard, I feel.
Yeah, I think the main I would contribute the large amount of testing to this kind of success in quotation mark. I'm not sure. I mean, it's not entirely a success because it's not. You know, there's still some problems tied to it. For example, like I said before, it's kind of weak to the top guns, to the strong Protosses. But yeah, a lot of testing, and thanks to SC Docker, that that SC Docker alone made this process all possible. But still, it's a very challenging problem to tackle. Talking about the consistency, because I've encountered situations where my bot can win maybe 56 games to nil when I test it locally, but on Baso, right off the bat, when I update the bot, the very first game or the second one, the bot actually lose to the same opponent on this probably the same map, and at times like this can be very it enraged me very, very often, and then I was thinking, is the basal environment different than mine, or did I do something else? Then I have to dig it further, despite the large amount of games I've already tested. So it's a tedious process, but yeah, like I said, consistency actually is pretty big for me, and thanks to it, and the bot keeps climbing, like you said. It's like watching my own kid growing from age 3 to maybe age 5. Finally, he does fewer dumb things, which which is relieving. Yeah, that's my experience.
SC Docker is a great tool, although it has its quirks, but still it's immeasurably valuable in testing bots and everything. Alright, I think what I will do is I will just announce some news items and stuff, and feel free to talk about it at length. And of course, as always, you can bring up your own topics. I have written some news type of items out, but other than that, yeah, it's free form as always. So let's have like the quick things out of the way. Yesterday I participated in a cast with the CPL, the Coach Pupil League organizers, and evaluated SCHNAIL as a tool for training purposes. This is not as interesting for bot authors. It was aimed more at players, but I'd like to mention that we played Halo as well, and I think it performed very well. It's just, well, it had I think macro mistakes, but with Halo and with some other bots, the conclusion was, oh, this is a great tool to practice against, and the bots are not that different from human games that it is completely different. So thanks for all the work, and for you too as well in person. Thanks for all the good work, and just keep at it.
The adoption of SCHNAIL has been really fun to watch. A lot of people have been picking it up. The software itself is getting better and better every week. I think this is going to be like the start of a lot of the next big things in the Brood War AI scene. I think the SCHNAIL release, the rollout, is going to be the launch of a lot of new things that we're going to see going forward.
I really hope so. And with that, I'd like to roll forward with the SCHNAIL news, because yeah, I'm pretty much, you might have noticed that I publish fewer articles and everything. All my smart time is spent on SCHNAIL, and I think this is the project I want to bring to, well, not to an end, but to a completion, because technically it's still in beta, and the state reflects that we have stupid bugs and like baby teething. How does it call? There is like toothing problems or something like that is the phrase, when you just growing pains. Yeah, that's the best phrase for it. So related to SCHNAIL, in the beginning of this week, ranked ladder is a reality, so you can go on the SCHNAIL client and just play ranked. Already I adjusted the matchmaking a little bit, and it will be continued to be adjusted. And without saying anything, because I have strong opinions on the subject, I'd like to ask your impressions so far. And the funny thing is, there was no ranked games played against PurpleWave yet, so clearly something needs to be adjusted. But other than that, or maybe including that, what's your impression so far?
Well, in general, I think it's a very positive thing. I've used Drop Launcher to play against other bots. It feels SCHNAIL is a little bit better, a little bit easier to use. And there was some little issue I encountered earlier this week about the wingless defender secretly ninja nuke the BW head EXE thing. But yeah, I guess in general it's a lot of fun. I played a few games versus Dragon and got slaughtered, unfortunately. But yeah, no, it's my quick overview. It's a very, very positive thing. I hope that it can continue to receive updates.
As well, in the near future, yes. And yeah, go on that.
Very early on in the ranked play to kind of see how things are going. I think it'll take a bit more games to see how things flesh out. It does seem that the matchmaking is already fairly good, but could definitely use improvements. But it'll necessarily be the case that the consequences of a lot of those decisions won't be seen until they're put into practice and we see how they interact with the real world.
One thing I've been contemplating is adjusting the chances. Yeah, first of all, how it is performed. I think many of you saw the matchmaking algorithm, but in short, and actually I discussed this with Dan, and he gave me an idea, and I modified that a little bit. So thank you, Dan. It was good. The base algorithm is just sort the bots into buckets by ELO difference. So all the bots that are 20 ELO from your position sorted into one bucket, positive and negative bot. We are saying difference in a mathematical sense, and then all the bots in the same bucket have the same chance to be selected. And an algorithm goes to a bucket, shuffles the bots, and goes through them one by one and rolls a dice. And if it's lower than the chance, then the bot gets selected. And I think this works reasonably well. But what I'm thinking right now is add the total games played as some kind of weight into that. So bots that haven't been played as much get a slightly higher chance. And in the long term, that could balance it out. But yet again, we only have a few hundred matches played so far, and we have about 100 bots. So it's not surprising that some of them didn't get played yet.
Then we should have Sundays are only PurpleWave day. You can only play against PurpleWave.
Yeah, that just the matchmaking algorithm just should keep that in mind. It's only fair.
Yeah, exactly.
So that is being adjusted. I think I will adjust it every like 500 matches or so, and when I can see a meaningful improvement. It is hard to just wait it out, to be honest, because I have to sit tight and wait for the number of games to roll in. Okay, another announcement, and you will like this very much. Then I showed that to you, but to everyone else. And how I will post it in the chat. So I was thinking, what could I develop for SCHNAIL that is not necessarily related to that. And I got together with my girlfriend and we designed a plush SCHNAIL, and you can see it on the stream right now. This is the prototype. It will be maybe look slightly bit different, but yeah, you can get a SCHNAIL plushie very soon. I will post the picture in the chat.
Simply viewing this plushie restores my humanity and makes me feel about 2 years younger just looking at it. I think the experience of holding it and squeezing it in your arms would be even better.
Okay, so that's the news. We are still like this is a prototype. It will be adjusted a little bit. Then I will put up somewhere, and you can buy it and get one. So that is the big news. I think it's quite good. It's the first draft, but I really liked it. I honestly, by just from the concept art, I expected worse. Let's leave that on the screen and gaze upon it for a while. And
It's very majestic.
absolutely as derpy as it should be. Okay, two more things about Snail. The one is we have another replay contest, and of course both authors can submit replays. In fact, I encourage you to. The replay has to be somewhat interesting. Other than that, there are no real requirements, and this time Rapid will cast them. Rapid is a cool guy. Rapid casting. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not. Cool guy. He was very enthusiastic about and he said he likes the project. I don't know if he played or played a lot, but hey, that's a good feedback. And I personally really enjoy his casting style. So it's a match made in heaven. So submit your replays, and the next features, one of those is a replay viewer / leaderboard on the website. In the client there is a match history tab, but that's aimed at just seeing your own games. It will be maybe improved a little bit, but that's not a fully fledged replay browser now, nor should it be. I plan to have a leaderboard and a replay browser similar to SSCAIT, but maybe with an extended search function on the website. So yes, that are the news, and I add anything if you want, but I don't think this is a very discussable item.
I submitted a couple of replays, or about 24 replays of myself playing in some of the top 20 bots or so. I guess I'll pick out a couple of those and send those in for the contest, and everyone else should too. It'll be a lot of fun. Rapid's a great caster, knows the game inside out, and I think we'll have a good time.
Yeah, just send it to us. And the next big thing, and I think this it is huge, that Chertychki is leaving the University of Prague, and with it the SSCIT will have to move somewhere else. And as I understood, the SSCIT will continue, but I'm not sure that if we have a downtime between that and the moving or not. And basically, I'm thinking that someone mentioned that this might be the point in time when we should think about where to go from here, because the SSCIT platform and website and everything has been a bit static or pretty much the same thing for the last few years. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the stream is a big attraction that draws people into the scene. It's how I got involved. I know it's how a lot of other people got involved. So I think it's an important part of the community, an important part of the scene. So regardless of the technical challenges involved, I think it'd be very valuable to keep going.
Not to mention that if you go to the SSCIT stream, just random people watching it, like people who have no idea what it is even.
Yeah, it's a great discovery mechanism. You don't have to have StarCraft installed or know how to use the replay viewer. You don't have to do anything. You just tune into Twitch and you get to watch some games, which is very nice. The fact that it runs the actual StarCraft client makes it a bit more engrossing. It feels a bit more like you're watching a live game, which you are. So it's a very nice setup.
Yeah, I was going to add that the when I first started, the challenges they set up were actually a big factor for me to pursue. I was seriously pursuing these challenges starting from zero. So yeah, it's a very fun experience for me. And the other thing is the annual SSCAIT tournament, which I'm not sure if Mr. Sutiki will continue this tournament, or I don't know how it will go, but that's also somewhat big. Besides the the usual suspects such as AI8 and COG. Yeah, I certainly hope that these two things or at least the tournament can continue somehow.
I think it should. It should. And what other thing is, I was really sad that Nepeta is no longer casting games because I think he was the best. So that's a little bit sad. But I'm casting and Nightcat casting the weekly games. I would like. Not necessarily in the context of SSCIT, but more bot games being casted somewhere, because apparently that is a popularity factor somehow.
I was just thinking that in terms of casting, would it be a good idea to invite some bot authors to just co-cast the weekly thing? Because I don't know, I can imagine I would be up for it if you know this is a thing or people like it.
I personally can only say that my experience with this podcast that many bot authors are kind of introverted and have some fears about talking live, and maybe they just don't want to do that at all. And I think that applies to a live co-casting as well. Not everyone wants to talk on stream or live or even any kind of recorded form, which is perfectly fine and acceptable, but that's certainly an issue in here. And with that being said, thank you guys for being here, because of course I'm not gonna name anyone because I respect their choice to not wanting to participate in a podcast or anything like that. But yeah, this is a real factor, and like I invited many people who I would really like to hear, but they declined because they just don't want to do this. Yeah, go.
To reinforce the point by being silent, leaving some dead air time.
Yeah, usually it's like I always edit out the silences because this like Discord talk is not like live talk. You have to give a little bit of silence to your guests.
Someday in the future, we'll all learn how to just push to talk like native speakers of Discord.
Yes, people who were born on Discord. Yeah, certainly.
The next generation will be pushing to talk since birth.
That's only reasonable. And that brings up an interesting point, because how you said that the achievements motivated you, and it's interesting to me, but because I think you're the first one who I've heard this from, but it would be really interesting to know how many people were motivated by this, because of course this is something I can add to SCHNAIL, and I can entice authors to work harder. Goddamn it.
Yeah, for me, competitions are a very big motivator. My activity on PurpleWave is definitely ramped up very heavily before competitions. People may know me as friendly, but I'm also very competitive. I very much hate losing, and you know, if there's a competition, if there's something to fight for, it definitely gets me going, gets the blood pumping. I put a lot more time, a lot more energy in. It also gives focus. You know, it's one thing to just kind of tinker around with the bot and submit it every week and see what happens every week. It's another to go into a competition and say, hey, what exactly is it that I need to do in order to get first place in this competition? And that kind of focus is a very big driver of a lot of the improvements in bots over the years. I think that the improvements week to week during standard ladder competition are one thing, but you really see big spikes in improvement for tournaments. I think it's a really big motivator. I think it's very powerful. And I think with SCHNAIL, for example, you have the opportunity to introduce another motivating factor of play against humans, where although, you know, week to week rating improvements in your SCHNAIL rating are one thing to fight for, actual matches against humans are another.
Yeah, all right. Some kind of showmatch type arrangement would be nice, I think. But I haven't thought about that. Yeah, I will be talking a lot about SCHNAIL, because that is basically all the things I'm doing related to Brood War AI. I can't help myself. So even though we are not constrained to talking about that, I will be circling back. Feel free to interrupt me.
I'll observe that right now is kind of the quiet time of year in terms of competitions. That most of the competitions tend to happen in the for bot versus bot tend to happen in the second half of the calendar year. That you have the COG submission in July, A tends to fall September, October-ish, SSCIT in December, and then AIST in around the February timeframe. So this right now that we're in is kind of the off season for bot competitions, which is not to say that things aren't happening, because I think the off season is really the best time to work on experimental things, to work on things where it may take some time to iron out all the kinks, but which may be able to take your bot to the next level. Actually, I think that cycle is kind of healthy in that if you're always preparing for competition and trying to keep your bot in shape for a competition that's coming up in a couple of weeks, it's hard to kind of make those transformative changes that are not just incremental improvements, but actually are maybe replacing one system with a new version that offers more possibilities, but isn't necessarily going to be finely tuned the first time you do it. So that's the kind of time we're in with the calendar year right now. What I expect to see with, for example, COG in that time of year is bots coming up with things that they just haven't shown before, new functionality, not just little build improvements, little bug fixes, but really new stuff coming out of the bots. It's the exciting time of the year.
Absolutely. I'm waiting for the next big competition actually, and what I also like is with every competition we see some new competitors appearing from nowhere, and that is good to see. Well, not every competition, but Seda was a big surprise back then, and I'm really hoping to attract new people and new I don't know, companies, any kind of participants into this scene, because people who take it a little bit seriously tend to stick with it.
I've seen very little rhyme or reason to where folks come from. It can be very hard to predict. So really, just the more surface area the scene can get, the better. That's why SCHNAIL is a big asset in that it reaches out to a different part of the population. The folks that are focusing on StarCraft related news and the StarCraft scene, they're the ones more likely to hear about SCHNAIL, get involved. They're likely players themselves. But really, the next big author can come from anywhere.
And I will consider a milestone when someone writes a bot exclusively for SCHNAIL. And we are not there yet, but I already saw some people saying that, oh, I like this, I want to write a bot because I encountered it. So yeah, it's fresh blood, and that's always good.
Although I think I'll have to add that if you were to create a bot just for SCHNAIL, it's going to be more difficult than for developing a bot for a bot versus bot ladder, because obviously humans are more challenging, and they don't do things as consistently as bots do, and it's and this also makes the learning process of bots very, very challenging, because every time you observe different things, and how do you learn effectively? And if you lose this game, do you change your strategy, or do you actually think, oh, I should still be using this strategy because I can analyze why I lost and then try to improve in the next game. But yes, I definitely welcome new bot authors to join this field and start to develop their own bots.
What I see happening is a virtuous cycle of human play, and particularly maybe events involving bots versus human play, continuing to provide motivation for authors to do more of their best work. Some folks are more motivated by tournaments. Other folks are probably more motivated by have their bots play against people. But as the bots get better, that also makes for better practice partners for your own bots. It's necessarily the case when you're developing a bot. You kind of need an opponent who can face you repeatedly without any amount of exhaustion, and often at superhuman speeds. So bots are always going to be the best development partners for other bots. If you're developing your bot, you're definitely going to be testing against other bots all the time. But as those bots become more tuned for playing against people, they'll also become better opponents for tuning your bot to play against people. So I see that being a virtuous cycle in the development process, and part of the reason why I think SCHNAIL is so important.
Can't say anything but can't do anything but agree with that. And yeah, even though I view SCHNAIL as some kind of a divergent thing, because definitely the meta is different, and it will continue to be different, but these the human versus human and human bot versus bot ladder can learn for each other, just as you said.
I know you have the opinion of bot and human metas having inherent differences and tending to diverge, but I want to present the counter argument to that. I strongly believe that actually the metas will only converge more with time. That there may be some differences, but those differences will be slight. They're really the fundamental limitations and constraints of the StarCraft game don't really change that much between bot and human play. You can't really escape what the game does and does not let you do, and that while bots and humans will have somewhat different strengths, the still core of the game is still the same. The build orders are still going to look pretty similar. The tactics are probably still going to look pretty similar. There may be some things that bots can execute that humans can't, and vice versa, but they're more going to be at the fringes of what the game is. They're not going to really radically alter what good play is. I really think that over the years, we've already seen that the bot meta converges closer and closer to human play. I think that trend is only going to continue going forward.
Well, one factor is that humans play more, like many more games, or well, maybe not numerically gives more, but definitely more humans and more type of humans play StarCraft, and they come up with more ideas, and it is easier to take those ideas and implement them than trying to come up with your own. That being said, there are some bot-specific strategies that people have come up with. So I think it's what you're saying. I don't necessarily disagree with, but I see the reasons lie elsewhere.
I think the bot versus bot specific strategies that have some merit to their use are mostly based around not trying to beat an opponent of equal strength. It's to me, it's a symptom of having tournament formats which encourage you to try to get 100% win rate against weaker opponents, such that you can run a strategy which builds a bunch of cannons that you're natural because your opponent won't be able to crack it, and then just rolling over them with whatever you can produce off two bases because you can produce more units in 10 minutes than a less optimized bot. But I think if you're using evaluation metrics which resemble human play, namely either matchmaking against opponents of similar skill or elimination style tournaments, that the strategies that will succeed in those environments will be much, much more similar to human play than what we see in, for example, win percentage round robin bot tournaments.
Yeah, I think we talked about this in a previous cast. The tournament format definitely affects how the bots play. I mean, you're always trying to game the system at some level, and that's not even a bad thing. I think it's like human nature, and why wouldn't you? I mean, yeah, but with different formats. Maybe different formats will encourage different builds or lack thereof.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's actually a big motivation to try to fashion tournaments in a way that encourages that kind of play. We want to encourage bot authors to focus on, play against similar leveled opponents, such that they tend to reproduce. Such that they tend to focus on things that are going to work in high level competition, which will make the bots more competitive against humans. I think that's really an important factor in having the bot scene develop faster, accelerate the pace of bot skill development, such that we're able to, take on stronger to stronger human players and approach the pro level faster.
What are the human specific behaviors in your bots? I'm curious about that.
So PurpleWave strategies are largely derived from professional style strategies. I've watched every ASL match there's ever been. I watch every KSL match. Watch other stuff. Watch historical stuff. I watch some streams. I try to read up on every English language discussion of StarCraft strategy there is, and sometimes Google Translate the Korean sites if I have to. So really, what PurpleWave runs is the intersection of what humans tend to run with what could be executed with PurpleWave's current capabilities. So, for example, there are some strategies that PurpleWave doesn't quite have the technique to execute. One example I've wanted to implement for years now is a Protoss versus Terran proxy robo one gate reaver drop, where you proxy a robotics facility outside the Terran's base, and then build a shuttle, build a reaver, and then try to do harassment with it. But the bot's handling of the Reaver isn't reliable enough that that's going to be a sensible strategy even against peer opponents, just because it's going to miss micro it every couple of seconds, lose the Reaver, and then lose the game. But if you have a human with competent micro, and it's still a pretty strong human we talk about, like 1900 plus in the ladder, then that becomes a viable and interesting strategy. So that's an example of something that I would omit from PurpleWave. But then the kind of core stuff, like the expansion timings in Protoss versus Terran, using 1-gate core, expand on 21 or 23 or 28, things like that, are really just derived from human play because they're meeting the same constraints of the game. Those are just the times where you can, for example, safely expand against Terran and not get punished too easily, or have a chance to defend against aggression while still having a fairly fast expansion. So the graph of possible strategy selections in PurpleWave is mostly, I'd say 90% plus, derived from human play. And then there are a couple of things which are tuned for the bot meta. For example, we've seen with, for example, bots like Dragon that could control marine and tank armies in a way that humans sort of can't, and that it can pull the marines out of Dragoon or Storm or Reaver range, keep them hugged up against the tanks, such that if you want to dive in the tanks with Zealots Dragoons, you're going to have to take shots from the marines no matter what. And that's something that's a bit easier for Dragon than a human player. The macro cycles are also a bit easier in that it's tough to build marines and tanks simultaneously because the build times don't line up, so you don't have a convenient, okay, this is when I go back to my base and click my factories and barracks and hit T and M to get my units. But for bots, that's not an issue. So for those reasons, marine tank is a little stronger in bot hands than it is in human hands. So as a result, PurpleWave runs one late game composition in Protoss versus Terran, which is designed to deal with that. It's designed to deal with the limitations of, okay, humans are less likely to do this. We don't see it in pro play, but bots may come at you with tanks and a lot of marines, and those marines may also have instant speed, storm dodging, or scarab dodging reactions. So we need to be able to fight against marines with double upgrade gateway units. Now that's something you just wouldn't see too often in human versus human play, but in this case, it augments the human meta with something that bots can do, and thus PurpleWave has to adapt by having something that works against that. But then everything else it's running is kind of based on human meta. So late game, it might go carriers, it might go arbiters plus gateway units. So it starts with the human play as the core, with then specific adaptations to things in bot meta that might have a little trouble dealing with.
That's interesting. I think it is my personal opinion that in the late game, when you have thousands of resources, you have no excuse not having upgrades. It's like the every upgrade is a force multiplier, and it costs approximately 1 or 2 units cost. If you have 1,000, especially if you are supply blocked, you should go for upgrades. It's a no-brainer, like 75% of the cases.
Well, for one, you should almost never be supply blocked in the first place. I think that's actually like just something. If you're writing a bot and you're in the early stage of developing a bot, just making sure that you're never supply blocked is one of the most important things you can do to be successful. But with regards to upgrades, what I'm talking about isn't whether you do or don't get upgrades. It's a trade-off of how early you get them, how many, basically when you get them, not whether you get them. So in Protoss versus Terran play, typically, you might start upgrades, but you're likely starting it after something like Arbiter Tech. You might get other things before the upgrades. But when you're fighting against Marines who can dodge storms at instant speed, dodge scarabs at instant speed, upgrades are your best tool for dealing with that. So what I've found works is getting 2 forges, spinning 2 upgrades at the same time, and doing that much earlier than you would against standard mech play by Terran.
I have nothing to add. How about you with human anti-human specific modifications?
Well, so for now, there's no such thing as my bot would play the same as it would play versus bot. But the thing I plan to add, or well, in the remote future, not sure how, I'm not sure when, is to sort of exploit my imagined weakness of a human player. For example, can a human player deal with early vulture harassment with good control? Maybe not, or maybe it'll be very, very difficult. So because of that, so I wanted to have a build that will rush out will produce the vulture at very very early time. For example, you put a Rex at supply 8 and then finery at 9, and then you go straight to the factory, two factories, and roll out the vultures as soon as you can. Then try to if your micro as a human player is not good enough, then you will suffer from the early vulture harassment. And this, I think, it's going to work versus Protoss and Terran mainly. For Zerg, it's probably, well, it could work in some degree because from all the human players, the games from all the human players I've watched, they tend to go for a 12 hatch into mutas against my bot. So this vulture strat can work too. So that's my general my intuition to this problem. How to design a human specific build.
I think that yesterday's stream we concluded that Halo is the most annoying bot to play against because it taxes the humans' attention too much.
This well, thanks. I think that's a compliment, and
it absolutely is.
Thanks so much for that. And I thought, I think there was a series played by Jealousy, a Swedish player, and I think in one of its, I think it's the TVT match. He directly said that, oh, this is annoying because my race were harassing his SCV line at the natural, and being constantly doing that, and it's just so annoying to deal with. And you have to get up the turrets at a time, but also you don't want to slow down your army development. So it's, like you said, very very taxing on the human end. So you have to deal with multiple things at a time.
Spoiler alert, the human eventually won, but it was much slower just because of this, that Wraiths are harassing my SCVs again, and in the end we concluded, okay, I won't bother with it, I just outproduce the number of SCVs killed, and with Wraiths you can make more SCVs than Wraiths can kill, apparently.
Yeah, it's true. I call them the expensive joke. Wraiths are so more expensive than Muta, but their combat effectiveness is just, I don't know how to put it, but it's just disproportional to their cost.
I think they are still very cost effective in that regard. So even that the fact that we can outproduce them does not mean that they didn't trade favorably. So it's not what I'm saying, but maybe how should I phrase it? The Wraiths didn't win the game. Wraith harassment didn't win the game or tear the game in the end. There was other things that needed to be done.
I think Day9 put it pretty well in one of his StarCraft 2 tutorials many years ago. If the opponent does something cute, does something other than building an army, just go kill them. Just go kill them. If they make Wraiths don't do a lot of damage. Just go kill them.
Spoiler alert, that's exactly what happened.
Yeah, I agree. That reminds me of a comment from Artosis. He said if a Zerg is pushing you or harassing you with the mutas, then if you're doing a bio build, you just counter push. You just hit their natural, hit their main, and force the mutas to go back. So I think there's some similarity or analogy.
Actually, that was another type of match we had yesterday. Basically, I don't remember which bot it was, but Mutas started harassing, and the bio army just moved out. And the Mutas didn't return to defend the bio army, and yeah, the bot just got killed.
I observed this in my own games against the bots, that very few of the Zerg bots actually handle a Terran that pushes out aggressively with a pure bio army. As we've learned from pro play, if the Terran is doing that, a lot of times you need to reactively drop some Sunkens at your natural in order to not die, especially against something like a 2-Rax Academy timing off of one base. And when I ran that build against bots, they basically all died. The games are over in 7 or 8 minutes, and that's partly a symptom of the fact that almost no Terran bots do this. That there are very few Terran bots that are properly executing a 2-Rax Academy attack, and thus we see that the Zerg bots are not properly able to defend against it because it's not something that's come up in testing.
I think Willie T is doing something similar to 2-Rax Academy timing push, but I'm not sure how effective it is against Zerg.
It's very strong. I played against it myself as a human. Willie T was actually the bot. Sorry, I played Zerg against that build, and Willie T almost beat me with it. The push was very deadly, but in this case, the answer to it was just running some lings around the army, and then it wasn't able to push in. But I would guess for Zerg bots that surviving the Willie T attack is very difficult. If I recall correctly, the timing might be a little late compared to the human timing, and that builds up a bit more of an army. What you see with the 2-Rax Academy attack is you have like 10 Marines, and then as soon as your first 2 medics finish, you attack, and then you rally 2 fire bats behind it. I think Willie T builds up a couple more fire bats and like a few more units before it attacks, which I think takes the edge off of it, although it does also go all in with a bunch of SCV pulls. So it's a slightly different attack, I think, than the traditional 2-Rax Academy timing, but it is itself very scary still.
I have nothing to add to that. Let's answer Antiga on the chat. He says that 2-port Halo build is entirely capable of killing some human openings quite easily, especially against most popular ones. And another point he makes is M+M control is frankly pretty poor and doesn't handle pushing defenses properly. I have to agree on that. When casting some games, I noticed this, that bio usage could be improved for many bots.
I agree. There are a couple of factors that make that difficult. One of which is understanding the impact of healing on combat. That I don't think all combat simulators properly handle medic healing, which causes the bots to severely underestimate their strength with the bio army. I think another issue is that in Terran versus Zerg situations with Marine and medic, is that a lot of times the only thing keeping the Zerg alive is that it has a sunken wall, and that if you push down that sunken wall, even at great cost to yourself, you can basically just keep rallying in bio units and win the game. And that comes into something that bots tend to have some trouble with, which is evaluating trade-offs. And that we have this notion of combat simulators where you look at one side's units go in, the other side's units go in. Hopefully they have smart simulated behaviors, but then you're left evaluating whether or not you like the results of that simulation. And if you just look at it as a straight, well, we lost more value of units than they did, it's a bad fight, you're going to miss out on opportunities to, for example, take down the last sunken, which is then going to be hard to replace, which then means the follow-up attack is going to kill them. That's the evaluation that bots have trouble with right now, and I think is one of the reasons why Terran bots aren't as lethal against Zerg bots as they could be.
Also, I think that something that is not utilized properly with bio, you could use like reserves, like go in and just rotate your damage units out. Obviously, that won't work against lurkers or such, although it maybe can. But I just see the medics staying there healing, the Marines not moving and hoping that they can out-heal the damage, which almost never happens. But if you just step back, push a healthy Marine forward and keep doing that, and eventually you will cause more damage than the enemy and kill it.
You know, I've tinkered with kind of damage unit retreating. I've seen some other authors try to do so as well. It's one of those things where if you do it well, it's pretty nice, but if you do it anything less than pretty well, you wind up killing yourself. For example, some bots have experimented with pulling back injured Zerglings from a fight. After all, the Zerglings are pretty fast; they can often get away. But what you see is any Zerg versus Zerg fight, trying to retreat injured Zerglings gets you killed. Just straight up causes you to lose even engagement. 6 Zerglings versus 6 Zerglings, trying to pull back a weak Zergling just causes all the other Zerglings to die because you really needed just the extra one hit from that Zergling to snowball a fight in your favor. And another factor which actually complicates things, which in theory sound like pretty nice, of like trying to retreat individual units, is that brood war pathing is very rough. That a lot of times you try to move a unit away and it just winds up moving forward, it gets in the way of its other teammates, it winds up doing less damage than it otherwise would, and then still dying anyway. So with a lot of cases, you're getting 90% of the value just by having units fight and die and trade with the enemy versus trying to do something cute and get them out and heal them later. I think it's a bit less true for air units, which travel a lot more smoothly. I think McRae was having some luck with having individual mutalisks retreat. Although I'm of the opinion that in Zerg versus Zerg you really can't do that, but in Protoss versus Terran, Zerg versus Terran or Zerg versus Protoss, that could definitely make a lot of sense.
Yeah, there are some cheeses that really could be well executed by bot. I actually did this against a bot when I was testing. We all know that Brood War is wonky with unit creation, and if you send a damaged drone to morph an extractor and cancel it, then you get a healthy drone. And there is no reason you can't do that in the enemy's base. So what I did, sent a drone, started damaging the enemy worker, and when I was at 10 health, just healed up using the geyser. And this could be so annoying, and one day I want to implement this.
You asked a good question earlier, which Howie answered. I wanted to take a chance to answer it too, which was, how does your bot adapt to play against humans? What are the human-specific adaptations in your bot? So I'll briefly talk about what PurpleWave does currently that's different against humans than against bots, and what I hope to do going forward to make the play better against humans specifically. I'll say the one constraint in trying to do this is that I don't want to divide my time into doing just human stuff or just bot stuff. There's just no time for that. So I want to focus on things which are only slight deviations between the two. So what PurpleWave currently does that's different versus humans is, one, against bots, the learning style, the adaptation between games is basically exploitative. It's expecting that there's going to be something that the opponent can handle in the whatever current version it's fighting against, such that if you go into a 100-round tournament or even something like SSCAIT, if it can find the strategy that the opponent can't deal with, it's just going to win every game, or it's going to win most of the games. Or even if it's just there's two strategies, if it can alternate between those, that it can win most games. So it's a very exploitative learning strategy. It's going to try what it works until it's proven that it can't work. But against humans, humans are flexible, they're adaptive. If you try the same thing against it repeatedly, it just means they're going to expect it, they're going to prepare for it, they're going to have more practice against it, and your win rate is going to decline. So the default learning behavior for PurpleWave against humans is mostly random selection of strategies, which is really correct. It's it's trying to find the Nash equilibrium mixed strategy in very rough, bad math fashion. But mostly it's random selection as opposed to greedily selecting the build that works, which is what it tends to do against bots. So that's the first adaptation, mostly random strategy selection to be unpredictable, such that humans can't, overly adapt to it. The second is that a number of the strategies are disabled. There's stuff in there which, as we've talked about before, is the typical seal clubbing, the stuff that's designed to beat known weaker opponents. And one, it's not very fun to play against. And two, the expectation I have with PurpleWave is that there's going to be facing a lot of pretty strong humans. So a lot of the stuff that's kind of stupid is disabled. Purple Swarm isn't uploaded right now. It's something I plan to do down the road when it's a bit more robust. But for example, it has that one hatchery Hydralisk strategy against Terran, which TSC Moo introduced a year or so ago against Seda, which shouldn't work by any measure. Once you see it coming as a human, it's very easy to stop. You build a bunker, put a marine in it, and laugh. But is effective against some bots that open a factory, and Seda was one of those. So PurpleWave has that built in there as a possible exploit against bots, but there's no point in wasting a human's time with that build. So it's just straight up disabled. So those are the two things that PurpleWave is doing right now to have specific adaptations versus humans. There's also a couple of minor quality of life things, like the performance is adjusted to try to ensure that it has a smooth frame rating against humans, as opposed to trying to optimize for bot tournament constraints. But that's the core of it. And there's also a couple of things I hope to do going forward. So one of the things that I observed from, for example, watching the CPL cast yesterday was I could visibly see that PurpleWave's performance was degraded based on the speed of the hardware that the CPL host was playing on, which is to say that PurpleWave's combat simulation runs in semi-asynchronous fashion for performance reasons. It'll simulate a fight, but to fully simulate with all of the micro behaviors that PurpleWave wants to include, so as to have an accurate simulation, it actually could take multiple frames to run that simulation. So the speed of the host computer affects the number of frames it takes for PurpleWave's combat simulation to occur. And what you can see from watching the CPL cast is when PurpleWave's units are kind of deciding, yes, I want to fight, yes, I want to flee, yes, I want to fight, yes, I want to flee, that the cadence of that is maybe about 1 or 2 seconds long, which tells me that it's running slowly. Because if I run that locally, those oscillations are going to be a lot faster. It's going to be deciding those in much more accurate time. And the difference in performance is quite substantial in that the bot can look very stupid if it's running on a slow computer. It looks kind of like it's running around drunk. Go home bot, you're drunk. So one of the things I hope to do for future versions going forward is use a different method of deciding whether to fight or flee, which is faster, or at least being able to switch between two, such that if you're running on a slow computer, it can run something which runs a bit faster and thus will produce smoother, less drunken looking behavior. There are good approaches known for that already. I'd say that McRave's Combat Simulator is the prime example of that. The Horizon Combat Simulator, which is open source, it's on GitHub, and PurpleWave has a Scala port of that in its code floating around, which isn't currently using. But I'd like to move to something like that, either permanently or at least be able to switch between them dynamically based on how fast the bot is running, such that PurpleWave can perform better on slower computers.
Wow, I don't even know where to begin. So that's one thing I wanted to ask in when you started is how dependent PurpleWave. Well, I guess the same goes for Halo as well. So feel free to answer how. So how dependent is PurpleWave on existing learning data? Because on SCHNAIL all the data are local currently. So a bot doesn't benefit from playing against other players. How much does that affect PurpleWave's overall, or any bot's overall performance, PurpleWave and Halos?
I'll say in the case of PurpleWave, it shouldn't have too much of an impact. That really, especially the versus human configuration, all the strategies it's intended to be using are sound, or at least have a reasonable chance. It may not be a perfect balance, a perfect mixture, but it's not running stuff that has a small chance of exploiting someone who can't beat it and then loses every other time to standard play or proper reactions. Everything in PurpleWave right now is a try at it's a reasonable stab at beating sound play.
Well, to me, for Halo, so it currently has 5 builds for each matchup, and I would say after about 5 to 10 games, then it'll just try to choose the build intelligently in an effective way, because it needs the amount of games to determine kind of things in its kind of builds it needs to be doing. And on the other hand, currently the builds that Halo is running are sort of a stabilized version of each build. For example, initially when the Bunker Rush came up, it lacks some reaction to certain things like full pull or early pull aggression. Then the Marines still will go to the enemy base and try to attack, but oftentimes they will just fail. So what I'm trying to say is that each of the build is sort of stabilized. It has some basic reaction to things, and some of the builds are designed to surprise the opponent if the previous build failed. It's so I wouldn't say that the impact is too much from the data, but it does take a reasonable amount of games to find a good strategy.
Yeah, go on.
Sorry, there's a lot of discussion around about bot learning and the best way of doing it and the importance of it. I actually think that adapting against an opponent is largely a crutch. And I think actually some of the current tournament formats do a good job of encouraging that point. So if you're playing in a win percentage round robin tournament or an elimination tournament like SSCAIT, you can't really afford games. You can't afford to waste games trying stuff that's not going to work. A lot of especially in the past couple of years, a lot of the win percentage round robin tournaments have required you to have a 95% win rate in order to win the event, which means that if you waste games trying stuff that doesn't work, you're not going to be able to hit that spot. It becomes an impossible bar to reach. So I think learning between games is something that should supplement the ability to win every game you go into every game with a reasonable chance of winning, prepared to play against reasonable strategies and beat them. The learning against opponent can supplement that a little bit. Maybe you make sure you avoid something that maybe they have an exploit for, maybe they're extremely prepared for, or more, maybe they're playing strategies which are simply strong against that and weak against other things, and that's the only thing they do. But I think learning is a crutch compared to simply doing sound play every game. We've seen a lot of examples of that, of bots that really only have one strategy tree built into them and performing really well. SCHNAIL being, I think, the prime example of that it really does about the same thing every game with lots of reactions, lots of adjustments. It tries to understand what your strategy is and react accordingly, but it otherwise does about the same thing every game. And as a result, it goes into every game with a very high chance of winning. It's not trying something exploitative. It's just trying to do good play. And it's had a lot of success with that and continues to have a lot of success with that. It's still very strong. Even bots that are, beating it aren't beating it that reliably for the most part. They're still dropping games to it. It also lets you invest more time in your one strategy tree, your one branch of reactions, rather than trying to have 20 different ones that are less finely tuned. So I think bot learning against specific opponents it's mostly a crutch. It's not going to be the source of a bot's strength.
And let's not forget that false positives are a real problem when playing against humans. Not even just when doing practice matches. Like some humans will throw a match for any amount of reasons.
That's a very good point, and it comes up in bot play too, where if you're dependent on your learning algorithm to find a certain strategy, and something else tends to work a little bit, maybe it gets fixated on that and keeps doing it and doesn't land on a better strategy. So if you have one strategy which wins 60% of the time or 80% of the time, it could take a lot of games to realize, oh, wait a second, maybe I have something else. So let's say you just have two strategies. Your bot has literally just two strategies, one of which will have a 100% win rate, the other of which will have an 80% win rate, or one of which has like a 95% win rate, the other an 80% win rate. And you start with the 80% one, you win 4 games in a row, great. You play a fifth one, you lose. Depending on your algorithm, maybe you keep going with it, maybe you don't. But maybe you switch to the other one. You're fortunate enough to switch to the 95% one. And maybe that 5% game comes in and you lose. And as a result, you now have the equal number of losses in both strategies. So you go back to the other one. And, fast forward, you're 30 games into a matchup and you're still running games on your weaker strategy. And that's with just 2 strategies. The more strategies you add to that, the worse it gets. I've seen examples of this where you take a bot which has, maybe 5 strategies per matchup and run a 100-game series against an opponent. And then you run multiple 100-game series and it chooses different strategies every time. And at the end of it, you may still not know which strategy is the best one to run in that matchup. So as you say, the false positive problem is a real problem in human play. It's even a problem against bot play. But yeah, there's definitely even worse cases against humans where, the human starts the game, he's like, oh, I had a bad split with my workers. I'm just going to alt QQ and then run another game. And now the bot's like convinced, yes, my terrible, 6 pool, no zergling, build 5 hatchery strategy is one to run. All the more reason to treat learning as a crutch, something to assist your performance rather than the core of it.
I think you should just disable learning for games shorter than 5 minutes or something. And other thing is bots don't throw games. Humans I see routinely just surrendering when they could still win, and doing the other way. Most prime example is the Cadenzi versus Locutus match. I think it was match 3 when Cadenzi just took it easy and Locutus recovered and trashed her. So yeah, humans are not rational actors for all intents and purposes.
I agree.
I have one more thing, and that's specifically addressed to you, Dan. And don't answer it if you don't want to. I'm just really curious. What's your development methodology? To elaborate a little bit on that, you are one of the most prolific bot authors, I should say. You constantly contribute and write a lot of code. At least that's my impression. What's your methodology? How do you approach the software development in general?
I wouldn't say I have a general approach to something as broad as software development, but I could talk about my approach specifically with PurpleWave. Ultimately, when I'm developing PurpleWave, I have some goal in mind of what I want the bot to be able to do. It might be win a tournament, it might be place on the ladder, it might be to show up well against humans, things like that. So all the goals for PurpleWave derive from that. There's always more things I want to do with the bot than I have time to do, so I have to focus and pick the things that are going to be most impactful. So I can talk about, for example, tournament preparation strategy. Like, let's say, I have a tournament deadline coming up. I'm 6 weeks out. What am I going to do to prepare for that tournament? The first thing we do is look at what I expect the competition to be. I'm going to look at what is the bar that I think I'm going to have to cross or be ahead of by some margin in order to ensure victory. So the first thing I might do is take the current version of my bot and then run a bunch of games against the opponents I expect to face. I use SC Docker for that. I have a script that just runs the games in the loop and then aggregates all the results so I can look quickly at the numbers. So, I can run it and then walk away and come back the next day and say, okay, I'm 31-8 against this bot. I'm 20-23 against this other bot, etc. Or here, and also have a breakdown by map, so I can see if there are maps that I'm having trouble on. Although that in practice only tends to show whether one map is like really, really badly busted. And then I'll open up the replay viewer, and the script also isolates all the losses, so I don't even look at the games I won. Just don't even look at them. It'll copy out all the games I lost, so I'll have a pile of replays where I lost, and then I'll just drag them in, watch the replay, just very quickly scribble why it was I lost. And that's not it's usually not like a very intensive, what are all the things I did wrong, but really like, what's the story of why I lost this game? What's the one or two reasons why I lost this game? And that often is like the first thing that went wrong in the game. Like, okay, I got supply blocked at 340 and then I died at 6 minutes. Well, the reason I died is probably because I got supply blocked. Not something that happened specifically, but an example of something I'd look for. Or maybe my worker who went to build this thing got delayed, and then my tech was late, and thus I lost a couple minutes later. Find the one cause for losing that game, and then I go through all of the replays, or as many as I could watch, and at the end of it, I have basically, okay, I lost 8 games for this reason, I lost 2 games for that reason, and now I actually have a pretty clear list of what are the most impactful things I can fix in order to improve my performance. Of course, there's a cost factor to that. Some things are cheaper to fix than others. Some things are more expensive to fix than others. Usually I'll just do the cheapest fixes and then see how things go. Something that comes up pretty often is you'll look at a game and say, okay, there are 2 reasons why I lost this game. One of these is expensive to fix. One of these is inexpensive to fix. And then you fix the inexpensive one and run more games. And then you find you actually just wind up not losing any games against that opponent. So the other problem is something you can just ignore for the time being. So that's really just drilling down onto the core things that I need to do in the few weeks I have to prepare for the tournament in order to have an edge. So that's the kind of loss avoidance part of it. But then there's also what are the core things I can do stronger to gain other advantages and win games. So you can look at StarCraft as a series of things where if you don't screw it up, you will tend to win more games. But there's also things where you can proactively do something advantageously and gain wins out of that. And for every tournament, I try to have like 1 or 2 things which I want the bot to do that it couldn't do before in order to gain that edge. In general, I find I don't have time to do more than 1 or 2 of those. They tend to be the most time consuming. Bugs tend to be fast to fix, and then new features tend to take a long time to iron out. So usually there's only a couple of new things per competition. But I'll go in with like, okay, these are the opponents I want to beat. They may be hard to beat just by fixing errors. So I want to do things proactively, have advantages against them. So something that you might see through the history of PurpleWave over the past year was more focus on shuttle control, reaver control, as I think my PvP can be stronger if I have good reavers. I'll say right now, the reavers, I'm not too satisfied with them. They definitely are not as good as some of the other units, but that was like the one thing I wanted to focus on as being something that I do proactively to be stronger. And then basically, as I get through the time I had to prepare for the tournament, I'm going to keep running that battery of games against opponents. I'm going to take all the opponents where I'm losing some unacceptable percentage of games against, put them in the ladder, run games, reevaluate every 24 or 48 hours to see how I'm doing. And then as my opponents reach, I have a 100% win rate against opponent, I'll remove them from the battery such that I have more games against the other opponents, or I have a shorter testing cycle. And I just iterate that until the deadline, where I'm very sweaty and breathing very hard. I haven't been sleeping very well. And then I make sure, a few hours or a day or 2 before the deadline, that I have some version that I'm just running tests against. It's a release candidate. I'm not going to touch it unless I see things that are either horribly wrong or very safe to fix, to make sure I don't have any errors in my submission, that I don't submit some game-breaking bug. Get that release candidate, test it, maybe make a small change, bug fix, test it. And once I have a stable version, that's the one that's going out, hit submit. and I just sleep very well or very poorly depending on when I had my last coffee.
What do you have against sleep? Because it sounds like you really hate it.
I love and adore sleep, but I feel like when I'm like in tournament preparation mode, I'm very much in the zone. So for example, in the time leading up to the first tournament I competed in, which was the 2017 CIG, I had about a 6-week period where I came back from a trip to prepare for it, and my lifetime during that period was roll out of bed, type furiously, drink coffee, type furiously, and then go back to sleep sometime around like 3 a.m. It was like incredible amount of hours. It was like 12 to 16 hours a day of coding. So there just wasn't that much time left over for sleep. That said, I wouldn't recommend doing that too often. I wouldn't recommend doing that for extended periods of time. I love sleep, but my tournament preparation mode is very manic and often involves very little sleep.
I find that if I don't get enough sleep, no matter how hard I try, I just make things worse. It's always better to just get some sleep and then get quality coding time instead of furiously hitting the keyboard.
I find it depends what I'm working on. You know, if it's something that like I'm just super in the zone on, I can get by with a bit less sleep. But when it's something where it's like I'm like dreading working on this, or like, you know, I'm doing my taxes or something, then yeah, I should probably have a lot of sleep before trying to tackle that.
Well, people are different, by the way. And how you've been a little bit sidelined, so if you want to answer the original question, which is your development methodology and approach to developing your bot and generally software development, then feel free to elaborate and talk at length.
Yes, I have something. So, I think the main thing is first to know what the objective is. Like in Dan's example, he I think he's trying to prepare for the tournament. So, for me, for example, if I were to, I wanted to have a better performance on a basal ladder, then I think the first with this goal set, then the next thing I would do is to go to my bots page on the basal ladder, and there's a chart called versus. Then on this chart there are the 70 top contenders listed. For example, for me, it's probably Crazy or PurpleWave. So, I would like, so I would, continue looking down on this graph and find out some opponents that I think I should be winning, but the win was still maybe 40% with 30%, which is not satisfactory. So the next thing I'll do is to, either watch a few of the recent games or just run SCDocker and use SCDocker to run a few games to find out what's missing, or if there are any problems or bugs, crashes that my bot has, then and try to fix it. Now, I think the second big thing in my development is to think about how I would apply the solution. Is the solution specific to this opponent, specific to my build, specific to this map, for example, or is the solution intended to be general enough so that it can be applied to, pretty much every case I can imagine. And then after applying this, then I start a loop again, try to run more games with a SCDocker. So now I have a script set up so that the bot, so that 14 games will be run, for example, at a time, because there's 14 SSCAIT maps, which the majority of the bots on the basal ladder support, and oftentimes it's much more than that, maybe 28 or multiples of 14. Try to, like I said before, or in the beginning of the podcast, I try to achieve the consistency. And if the fix does solve the problem, then I move on to the next problem or next opponent. But if not, then I dive into my code and repeat this process all over again. Maybe not necessarily run the 14 games anymore, but maybe let's say I have.
You're cutting out, Hao.
Not possible, right? So I only run this map maybe 10 times to find out if the new fix.
Yeah, you cut out a little bit. So can you go back like 2 sentences?
Okay, so I was saying that there's so I'm not so to continue, not necessarily would I run the same 14 maps if there are some problems in certain maps. For example, Fighting Spirit, where there's no wall to be found, then I'll run 10 games on Fighting Spirit to find out to verify if my solution works or not. Then that's that the loop continues until the win rate is somewhat satisfactory, maybe more than 90%, or maybe even more than 50% if it's against a strong opponent. Now that's the bug fixing or problem fixing side, and the other is the new strat development circle. So let's say I don't have the two racks Bio Academy timing push build enabled currently executable for my bot. So what do? I code this up, and I use Chaos Launcher this time in this process, because in this using the Chaos Launcher, you can see the results or see the reactions, the build timings immediately, without going through using SCHNAIL to run a few games. First of all, you don't need that many games. You only need 1 or 2 to find out if things work or not. And another thing is if let's put this new builder aside. If you were to develop a new micro, then I would use the software called SCM Draft, which is a map editing tool to create a customized map, and just set up the wanted scenario for this micro practice. If I can do some experiments with the new micro and without, then let's see what the effect is. I think not long ago I did improve my full pool defense. So with this SCM Draft, it's very, very, very easy. So you just set up the 6 Zerglings just right outside the base, and tell them to attack to you on game start, and then you will immediately have maybe 10 or 12 SCVs try to defend the rush, and so on and so forth. So I run 10 games as a batch, because there are some variations to it. So for example, in one run, you may be left with 6 SCVs. In another, you may be left with 10 SCVs. So it's not that possible. But you see, there's some variation. You want to control, you want to monitor what the variation is and what the mean value is to the performance, tied to the desired performance.
How you mentioned running 14 games at a time for like 1 per map. Those are all in parallel?
No, they're run in sequence. It's sequentially run. Because previously I tried to run them in parallel by using 2 cores, but the replays seem to be, some of the replays seem to be corrupted. I'm not sure if it's because the games were not run properly, or I didn't set up the SCDocker properly. But eventually I just abandoned this thought, and then just stick to the sequential games that are sequentially run.
I have the same experience. It's like SCDocker does not handle parallel games very well.
I've had success running SCDocker games in parallel. Usually I have 2 or 3 matches running in parallel on my 8-core machine. I know, for example, my bot will suffer if it doesn't have like a full CPU to utilize, but otherwise the game is technically run correctly. Has been my observation.
Are you a
We can talk about
wizard?
it afterwards. Maybe try to figure out a way that we can get you up and running with that.
What's your wizard class level then?
Pretty average.
Yeah, probably we just we just didn't configure it properly. And a question that popped into my mind is what are your non-StarCrafty inspirations in your life? Because I find that I can grind. I'm pretty good at grinding, but if I focus on one thing too long, I lose my creativity. So I better when working on my own projects, it's better to do something that inspires me than sit down and grind it out in a relatively short amount of time. And recently, as you might have seen, I was just playing old games and streaming them because they are fun and it relaxes me. And my productivity wasn't really suffering from that because uh, sometimes I did it in 2 or 3 hours, what otherwise could have took 5 or 6 because I just thought it through. So, are there any such routines or things that inspire you slash makes you more effective in the long run?
Yeah. Recently, I I managed to download the Command and Conquer Tiberian Dawn, the very original series in the very original game in the Command and Conquer series, and I set it into German because I like this language. So, I think it's like two of the best things in my life happening at once. So that's what I do during off time if I'm not coding my pod, and serves as a nice inspiration. Just something different than coding my bot, and something that I enjoy. So that's it.
I like playing football. That's like American gridiron hand dig football. I usually play every week, play in leagues, have a recurring team. To me, that's my happy place, and all the colors of the world shine a little brighter when I'm playing that. Aside from that, like making electronic music, like playing team video games with my friends, League of Legends, more recently Counter-Strike, StarCraft, things like that.
I always hated Counter-Strike, by the way. Just want to ruin for your fun. Yeah, there is literally no other reason I said that.
I hate it too, and I love it, and I hate it. I love it because it's challenging and exciting, and feels like a real thing I can sink my teeth into. And I hate it because I'm absolutely terrible at it.
Alrighty then. And it's funny that you like German. How it's like I live in Germany, so I don't hate German, obviously. But it's not a language that many people pick up for fun. Let's say that.
Yeah, I guess I'm the few people who actually enjoy the sound of it, or the way it's spoken. And think I was told by someone else that about the same thing, that the German language doesn't sound, I don't want to say nice, but yeah, but somehow I pick it up, and there's a I've been asked this question a lot. Why did you pick up German as your sort of a hobby or something you like? And I think the first thing is I enjoy the culture and people, and second is I found that there's some quite interesting link between the German language and the Chinese language. Chinese is my native language. For example, there's some certain words that are constructed exactly the same. For example, the word gum in German, it's literally translated to the teeth meat. In Chinese, it's about the same. It's exactly the same, teeth meat. So it's brutally simple, but you get the idea what this combined word means, and and with the few of the discovery, I decided to dig further and try to learn more of the words or the language.
It's like German is a very literal language. Like everyone knows a Flammenwerfer is something that werfs Flammen, and that's how most German words are constructed. If it's a thing that does something, then it's named a thing doer, and no dancing around the subject.
Yeah, it's flamethrower you're talking about.
Yes.
Is the same, but I'm more talking about, I think the German in the German language this happens much more often, and it's very very direct, and sometimes, like I said, very brutally simple. Cut to the point. There's no waste.
Yeah, I've been told, I might be wrong on this, that in Chinese the lighter that you light your cigarette with is named something like a fire making hand machine or something like that. So it's a long composite word that sounds like something like that. Is that true?
Yes, it actually literally translates to make fire machine.
Yeah. All right, that's an interesting detour into languages, and after living 1.5 years in Germany, I decided that I will learn the language as well. So I'm on the same path right now. I told it's somewhat useful if you're here.
Yeah, I think it will be interesting to at least use the language. I actually met someone who's from Germany last year while I was at a conference, and I had a good time there. And with my broken German, I talked to him for about an hour. Because this guy, his German is very when he spoke German, it's very very slow and in a way that I can understand very easily. And we talk about our hobbies, or why we were here, and things like that. So yeah, I can imagine learning the language can sometimes be fun when you actually use it, communicate it with people. So.
Yeah, but it's like if you learn German, there are difficulty settings. It's called easy, normal, and Bavarian. So I didn't pick the best place to just pick it up by hearing it.
Or this Bavarian can be it's a language of a.
Yeah, there is a separate Bavarian language, but there is a certain accent and everything that the Bavarians do, and it's a little bit harder than normal German. But yeah, Bytekeeper, who is an actual German, maybe can elaborate a little bit more on that. And I think that's enough detour of the German language, however interesting it is. So, any somewhat more StarCraft related closing thoughts from you, or any topics you wish to discuss? Because I'm out.
Hao, I'd be curious to know what you have planned for your bot for the next year, and totally not for reasons of competitive interest of my own, but really just curious what you're thinking about for your bot.
Sir, are you attempting industrial espionage?
Absolutely, but I'm just curious personally.
Carry on.
Yeah, so I think I've mentioned a little bit of, sort of indicated a little bit on this topic earlier during our talk. So, like I said, the consistency of my bot has reached a level that I'm kind of satisfied with. And like I said, the next thing I have to tackle is to have the bot be able to handle the big guns, namely. Yeah, I'm sorry to use this your bot, but your bot is really good, and PurpleWave, Locutus, Gracio, Banana, Brain, all the strong ones you can name. And as I said, currently the bot is kind of, I wouldn't say kind, but it's very weak against the bot, the top guns, and I would say that the win rate is almost below 30% or even worse. So I like to look into them and devise some solutions to that. For example, in TVT, I know for a fact that my tank engagement is not that great. Especially it lacks a way to have the tank to go offensive, to take out, to snipe, to one shot opponent's tank when it's left out from the group. But currently, I think the design philosophy behind my tank engagement is I hold this ground, and you better not come close to me. If you do, then you lose, and I gain advantage, and I advance. But there's no like offensive capabilities so far. At least it's lacking. So that's one big area I try to improve. But I know this will take a long time, and that's why I set it in a long-term goal, because it affects pretty much every TVT matchup, because tanks are used very, very frequently. Now for TVP, yeah, I think the main thing is I lose the games often because I cannot develop to the mid game or late game, probably because of the special tactics by the opponents for some of the drops or the goon pressure or you name it. So I would like to improve a few of my reactions to drop defense, to goon pressure, and also the tank formation when I do survive to the mid or late game and I decide to push out, then how to have the vulture, not only the tanks but also the vultures, engage the opponent's unit effectively. For now, there's still scenarios where the vultures will hang out in one of the opponent's base, and while the tanks were left alone and be picked off by the zealots and the goons. And it's not something that's kind of discouraging to me, and it's something I try to improve. And also I can see it very occasionally, but it happens occasionally the tanks will chase a goon, but then little did he know that the goons have friends, and the single tank will just get picked off and suicide into the enemies. That's another thing. But all in all, like I said, the next big goals for my bot is really to be able to step up its gameplay and be able to handle the stronger or the very strongest opponents.
Exciting. You cite the case of TVT tank lines. I'm always harping on so much of the game coming down to having better macro, better build orders, better reactions. But TVT feels to me like a matchup where the micro can be such a magnifier, a force magnifier in your ability to compete. I remember playing against my own Terran bot with myself as Terran, and I was like laughing to myself at how bad my bot's tank handling was. Although it eventually did roll me over with just having way more stuff. The strength of the bot was being able to siege and unsiege a bunch of different tanks individually so it could roll forward pretty quickly, although the actual coordination was very poor. But I'm looking forward to seeing what you come up with. I think having marginal improvements in tank line behavior can really break open the Terran versus Terran matchup.
Yeah, I think it's a very fundamental skills that every bot, every Terran bot should have. I mean, at least it's going to be very, very useful in the TVT engagement. I'm not sure how important. At least it's also important TVP. In TVZ, it's less important because you have the Zerglings and all that. But yeah, and also because the tanks, they're very, very expensive. If you think about it, it's 150 mirrors and 100 of the gas, and if you lose, then take long, and also they take a long time to train. So if you lose, then what often happens is the opponent just snowballs its advantage and roll you over eventually. Even with average micro or something, it just has more stuff. You just lose, like you said. Short words. I agree.
All right. Another thing is Antigua asked about some stats regarding SCHNAIL, and I'm gonna list them, and this will be interesting. So number of games. So far, there is around 3,000 games played total on SCHNAIL. And of those 3,000, there is 400 ranked games. The top ranking player is currently having 1,633 ELO. Yeah, that's a lot of games, although I suspect that many are just testing games, but still. So the top ELO, player ELO, is 1,633. Yeah, but the bottom ELO is minus 396. It is because it's that number because if you start a ranked game and you don't submit a replay within 24 hours, then that game is forfeited and counts as a loss. And I think some people tried to game the system a little bit here. The second lowest ELO is 1132, which is actually the admin account on SCHNAIL, and it is because I just entered the games to test it out. But then again, I can just set my ELO to 10 million anytime I want to, so who cares? Other than that, the players range between 1200 and this 1633. Both ELOs you can see in the client. Oh yeah, Antigua, that's true. If you forfeit a match, then your ELO will get degraded. But that we are still investigating the bots because it's not always just you killing the client. Sometimes it's a genuine crash, and I want to be want a finer control over that. And games per day, I don't know. Most played bot is Adias. Like it's like the number one. I didn't do I just wrote quickly some queries. Maybe I will do some detailed statistics. I don't know the percentages of ranked games, but ADS is the number one played bot. I think it is a combination of like being in the front of the list and being a high ranking bot. So yeah. I don't know. Any other stats you want to know about? Like Dan, how you as well?
How many users are currently registered with SCHNAIL?
I don't like to talk about that, but between 1 and 500. Antigua, these keep in mind that we only have 400 ranked games, and the other games don't modify the rankings. But I will, like I said before, I will make adjustments based on the total games played because I want every bot to be played. All right. So I was kind of interjecting into your conversation. I'm still I'm still out of topics. So yet again, any closing thoughts or topics you wish to discuss?
Well, I saw some Jaegers posted something in the, I forgot the channel, but he posted some questions that we hope Dan and I can answer or we can discuss. But I forgot which channel. Maybe SCHNAIL?
Yeah, I see it. Two things we haven't discussed. One is reason Protoss and Terran are still dominating the Basil ladder. What can Zerg do? Previously, in previous podcast episodes, we discussed this a little bit, but maybe we can talk about it. Why is seemingly Zerg is having a harder time advancing? Is it harder to write a Zerg bot in the first place?
Looking at Zerg replays, I've watched lots of Zerg games. A couple things jump out at me. The big one is that a lot of Zerg bots are not running very strong build orders. They're running a lot of exploitative stuff, and Purple Swarm is absolutely one of those. They're running exploitative stuff that isn't reactive. There's often a bias towards making too many combat units, not adding drones intelligently, having late tech transitions or lacking tech transitions. Really, I just haven't seen a Zerg bot that has had a build tree that is of the level of sophistication of what a lot of the top Protoss and Terran bots are running. And I recognize in some fashions that's harder. As for example, as Protoss, if you're making a Protoss bot, you're in your early stages, you can make a forge fast expansion build, and largely you can not have too many reactions, and you just have a build order. You always make probes, and it's pretty straightforward, and you can do pretty well with that. Whereas for Zerg, a lot of the strategies you are going to be dependent on what the opponent's doing, especially in that matchup, where if they open, Nexus first into a forge wall, into some kind of tech, what you have to do is very different than if they build 4 gateways and make a bunch of Zealots and Dragoons. But I'm not seeing that sophistication in a lot of the bots. There are a couple that have pretty good starts to that. I'd cite KillerBot as one that has like very strong early game build orders and reactions. But KillerBot, for example, later game doesn't quite have the same amount of polish as it does in the early game. And that's really the trend. That really, I look at these bots and say, okay, if these bots had build orders that were as refined and sophisticated as the Protoss and Terran ones, they'd be winning a lot more games. That's a big part of it. Another is that one of the tricky things with Zerg is that the way the game is balanced is around the power of the Mutalisk. That the Mutalisk is like this really fundamental unit in the Zerg versus Terran and the Zerg versus Protoss matchups. The maps are balanced around the power of the Mutalisk, things like that. And then without the ability to exploit opponents of the Mutalisks the way humans can, that bots are not going to be able to use the strategies that Zerg players rely on to be profitable in the mid-game period where Mutalisks are important. That's especially true in Zerg versus Terran, where right now there's basically no Terran bots that could really survive strong Mutalisk harassment. They may survive some Mutalisk harassment, they may have the units they need, or they may do some of the things right, but the harassment hasn't been exploitative enough that Terrans have to play honestly. They're underbuilding turrets, they're underbuilding anti-air, they're able to move across the map when they shouldn't be able to move across the map. Lots of things like that are the result of not having an exploitative Mutalisk micro. And there's definitely some good attempts at improving that. It's definitely been getting better over the past year or two, but it's still a weak point for bots. And I think that's something that Zerg bots are going to want to have to do better, such that they can effectively use the pro style build orders to do what the Zerg race should be able to do, and what the maps are balanced around the Zerg race being able to do. And then I think third is having reactions against things. I think I cited the example earlier of Zerg bots don't react well to Terran bio-aggression in the early and mid-game very well. They don't drop enough Sunkens, or they drop too many Sunkens. They're not tailing the Terran army and then building Sunkens just in time to deal with it. So I'd say those are the 3 big things, but I think the biggest one by far is the build orders. That the Zerg build orders are just not as polished as the Terran and Protoss ones. One of the things I think is a big part of that is the late game transitions are not very good. The Zerg can get into the mid game okay, but they don't get to Hive Tech quickly. They don't use Hive Tech very well. There's not a ton of Defiler usage, for example, despite the Defilers being the most powerful unit in the Zerg versus Terran matchup. Very few bots get them, very few bots use them, and the ones that use them don't tend to get them quickly, don't tend to be in good shape economically when they do get them. So I think the biggest area of improvement that Zerg bots can use to catch up with Protoss and Terran at the top end is better build orders.
I think there's one little thing I would like to add. So there's, compared to the top Terran and Protoss bots, there are relatively fewer active Zerg authors. I think one exception is Corona, and I think it's actually doing well. If you look at the versus chart, the top 70 contenders, I think Corona lists very, very, very highly on the chart versus some of the top, at least some of the Terran top Terran bots, and I guess the problem is you need more time investment to make the Zerg bots even better than the current state.
I'll say the one issue structurally in our whole scene for supporting Zerg development is that win percentage round robin tournaments are a unfair format for Zerg. straight up, it's not a fair format for Zerg. The issue being that the Zerg versus Zerg matchup is one that has a lot of variance built into it. It's a high variance matchup where, you know, one encounter could swing a game pretty easily. If your 6 Zerglings bump into their 6 Zerglings and the fight goes a little awry, that can snowball very quickly into a loss. So when you're in tournaments where you're the onus is upon you to win 95% of your games against a single opponent, other races are better equipped for trying to do that than Zerg versus Zerg. It's just not how the maps are designed. The game and the maps around the game are not designed to enable a better Zerg player to beat a weaker Zerg player, or like a moderately weaker Zerg player 95% of the time. It's just not how the game is designed. It's not how the maps are designed. So I think the format itself is punishing the Zerg. It makes it hard for Zerg bots to thrive in that, and then as a result, there's less motivation to make a Zerg bot to compete because some of the turns are just structurally stacked against you. So I think that's something that, if fixed, would help incentivize Zerg development. And I think there's actually a lot of opportunity right now to win with Zerg, because the current Zerg bots aren't playing at the same level as some of the top Protoss and Terran bots. Those bots themselves are not very well adapted. Something that Antigua has observed, for example, is that if you want to beat PurpleWave, the race to play is Zerg. Even though in tournaments, Zerg is a race that PurpleWave has the easiest time with, because the level of development isn't as strong on the Zerg side, which means that PurpleWave, my focus as the author of PurpleWave, hasn't been on beating Zerg that as much. I spent less time preparing against Zerg. It's less well tuned because the Zerg opponents aren't putting PurpleWave to the test. So if you want to go out and you want to win a tournament right now, with the caveat that the win percentage tournaments are a little more difficult, that SSCIT or AIST are a better focus for you, Zerg is a great race to go with.
Maybe on SCHNAIL they will see finally some justice. Probably not.
Yeah, I think SCHNAIL is a really good environment for that. One of the things that SCHNAIL has going for it, which Basel doesn't, and which is not to say anything bad about Basel, because it's an excellent system that is a strong part of the scene. But in SCHNAIL, because there's matchmaking, you're necessarily being measured on games against opponents of similar skill, or at least as the ratings converge over time is the idea of what will happen. And the metagame changes when you have an expectation that you're playing someone of similar skill, that you're basically trying to eke out small advantages rather than trying to exploit and trying to guarantee wins against weaker opponents. So I think SCHNAIL is definitely on the end of favoring Zerg in terms of the competitive structure, that it represents pro play, represents like BattleNet ladder play, more than, say, the win percentage round robin tournaments do.
Right, to a point then. But I don't think I recall that in human world we do something differently for the ZVZ matchup. I mean, is in the tournament. There's no adjustment. They're treated the same as other matchup like TVP or something. So I'm not sure. I'm not against it, but I'm not sure how we should proceed if we were to, treat ZVZ differently in the bot tournament.
I'm not suggesting that the matchup should be treated differently, but that the tournament structures should reflect the human scene in terms of the kind of opponents you're playing against and what matches look like. The issue is that, for example, let's say you took Flash and brought in 100 Terran players off the street and had Flash play a TVT against them. Flash would very likely win 100 games out of 100. But then if you went ZVZ and had, a J-Dong or an Effort or someone like that, or a Zero play against 100 Zerg players off the street, you might drop a couple games. Because Zerg versus Zerg is a more volatile matchup. The games are shorter. There are fewer interactions. There's more variance in the matchup. So when you evaluate players in that kind of setting, the matchup changes, and the maps are not balanced to encourage that. If you wanted to design maps such that you would win a Zerg versus Zerg against an inferior opponent 100% of the time, you'd have to make the maps larger, such that the game, where there are more interactions, there's less variance. So the solution isn't to make Zerg versus Zerg work differently than the other matchups, but to either have matchmaking where you're playing against opponents of similar skill, or to have competitions where all you have to do is beat one player in a heads-up matchup, not to try to win 100% of the games against all opponents. You can tell me if I'm doing a good bad job of explaining. I can try to roll it back.
No, it was fine. I think
it's fine, perfectly fine. Yeah.
Okay, guys. I think we are running almost 2 hours now, and my attention is a little bit sleeping, so I would like to wrap the cast a little bit. I think it has been an amazing cast, and we talked about a variety of different topics, and I would like to have you back, well, anytime basically. So no rush though, so we can talk about a few things, but let's just start to wrap it up.
Hey, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for having me on the show, Shanka.
And I'm very glad that you could finally make it, because I think you were the. I think when I started the Undermind, you were one of the first, if not literally the first guy I invited. So I'm happy that you're here, and I'm happy that Hao Pan is here as well. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, it's my pleasure as always.
Thanks again. Thanks for everyone for listening, and see you next time.